So for this discussion, I called it the ACE advisor because we know that academic advising is not something that individuals can just walk into, particularly with the cultures of our institutions, and our institutions, of course, are HBCUs. And so I think it was Jamila Lynn who brought up this morning about finding high impact people to serve in the role of an advisor at our institutions. And I think that really that those people are identified, of course, at the hiring stage, but I think it's also a responsibility as HBCUs to really help them to develop into our ideal advisor. The ACE advisor is what I'm calling it for just this discussion. So I do appreciate you all for being here this afternoon. I don't know if you all are members of NACADA. And so a lot of what I do with the advising practices at Claflin comes from NACADA standards practices, the CASE standards. So I don't know if you all have a copy of the recently published academic advising core competencies. If you don't, I will be happy to get you a copy. And so I use a lot of resources, as I mentioned, from NACADA. And so developing and helping our advising teams to practice the best that they can, they really do need professional development. Professional development starts at training, when we're training the people that we hire to fill these roles. And also the training should be continuous throughout their work as an academic advisor. And so the reason why this is important is because academic advisors can't really perform and work in the culture of our institutions if they're not knowledgeable about it. And so these training sessions, the professional development should focus around that, making sure the advisors know about our institutions as well as our students. The advisors need to know the students that we serve. And that's where the demographical data comes in that hopefully folds into our assessment practices for our learning, or student learning outcomes for advising. But advisors really need to know that. They need to know for our student populations, what theories are we drawing from? How do we expect our students to grow from having these advising experiences with us? What approaches do our institutions promote, encourage our advisors to use in their advising practices? Training and development really set the tone for expectations, what we expect advisors to do in their individual advising sessions for job performances. And also, advisor training and development is really the foundation of student retention. And so, when we are working with our advising programs, we have the basic general structure, the structure of how we are organized, and all of our processes and systems that we put in place. Advisor training and development is next to that. It is critical when you look at how your advising programs really have a direct impact on the student retention for the students that you are serving. And so just with that basic general knowledge, I have a few questions that I'm hoping that we can use to guide our discussion about how we are helping our advisors be trained, well-trained, and help them to practice continuous professional development. But here are some questions that I would like for us to think about for Lincoln, Dillard, and Claflin. How do we onboard these high impact people as academic advisors?
So Dr. Kim Moorhead, I'm the Dean of the University College at Dillard. And this fall has been really interesting as we all are new. And I got to
All of
Dillard,
you.
all are new. I've been working in higher ed for 17 years. I got to Dillard the week before the freshmen got there. And then I was onboarding my staff as registration began for the semester, literally building the plane as we were flying it. But I was trying to do as much rolling onboarding as much as possible. And basically, I feel like I had a system in place, and I want to shout out my first boss because what she did for us, I actually went to undergrad at Dillard. And when my first job in higher ed was at Dillard, what we did is we spent basically like a week and a half, and we did a rotation in every major office on campus. So we spent a couple of days in financial aid. We spent a couple of days in business and finance. We spent a couple of days in a registrar's office. We spent a couple of days in admissions, simply so that we could have a better understanding of what everybody else is doing. The right hand needs to know what the left hand is doing, because what often happens with advisors or when students come to advisors is we bounce them around a lot. And we may not necessarily know what needs to happen when they go over to that next office. And so, I mean, fortunately, I feel like this reference would make sense. I was like, back then you had to go to financial aid with stuff, right? So if I know in advance that I'm sending a student to financial aid, I'll be like, make sure you have a copy of X, Y, and Z. So when you go over there, you're ready, versus go to financial aid and then financial aid says, did you bring these things? So now the student has to go back to the room or call the parents and then pull up. I mean, now it's different with technology. You can have access to these things via email or whatever. But what I did, and then we got hit with Hurricane Ida. So while we were displaced by Ida, I still had my staff. We did a rotation so far with about 13 offices. Simply, what do you guys do? How can we help you? And then we're using that information to come up with our plan. So what I'm doing now is basically, I was making sure that for me, returning back to Dillard and my staff starting at Dillard, we had basically an understanding of the culture of the university and the offices that we interact with. So that way, when planning out what our year or semester was going to look like, we knew what the left hand was doing, and at the same time trying not to step on toes, right? Because in higher ed, things are very siloed, and I'm a connector. That's what I do. And then the fact that I'm a Dillard alum and people remembered me from my time here is just me. Hi, how can we help? And so I'm really trying to create a sense of community, and I felt like that's something that in itself is a high impact practice as far as like getting buy-in from your stakeholders also could determine how successful you as an office are when working with the students. So we did those things generally. And then internally, what I had them do is I did some personality assessments so we could figure out how we all work as a team and how those interactions that your personality may have, how you would have to react with students differently because their personality might be different than your personality, and what those interactions could look like. And then we ran a bunch of scenarios, extreme things, parents calling, saying that they're going to pull the financial aid if the student doesn't major in STEM, those types of things. So once we had the information about how the entire campus works and who does what, now when we do these practical scenarios, we could say, well, I know to connect them to this person, because now they know names that they could connect people to. So as much as we were building it as we were flying, I feel like I was doing the best that I could in the midst of my crazy semester thus far. But that's my answer to, I feel like, most of those questions. And then I'm still working out the evaluation. So we meet as a team once a week, and then I check in with my folks who all have projects. So behind me, you can see it, but behind me, I have a board where everyone's name and who's responsible for what. So we just check in on like how you come in on the things that you are responsible for without it being micromanaging, because I want to keep morale high as much with the chaos that we're in right now.
Right. And you presented actually a very interesting dynamic when the entire staff is new.
Down to the admin, everyone.
Everyone. So who at your institution, and this is not one of the discussion questions, but I guess it's just out of personal curiosity. Who at the institution then assumes responsibility to make sure as you're building the plane, you're building it with the expectations, the mission of the institution, the culture? Who is responsible for making sure that's happening when all of you are new to the institution?
Fortunately, with Dillard being a small school, I report directly to the provost, the VP of Academic Affairs. And again, I was an alum. I never really left. I was at Xavier. I was always around, right? So the folks at Dillard, the other deans at Dillard, they serve as my mentors to make sure that we're all on the same page. So other deans will drop by, they do wellness checks, like, are you okay? How can we support you? They let me bounce my ideas off of them. So the intention is that even when I got here the week before school started, faculty who remembered me from 20 years ago, they were like, what can we do to help you, because we don't want you to fail. And I feel like that is something that's incredibly important when the whole campus community can rally behind a whole office, because they understand this office is where it begins, right? I deal with first year students, I deal with the honors students. And if they don't have a positive experience in that first year, we will lose the students and they won't get to them. Right. So I think that because everybody has a vested interest in the students that we have and retaining them and making sure that they have a positive experience, fortunately, I have a support system in place, not only from up top, but from the other deans on campus, faculty members. Again, I'm leaning on my alumni status, right? I was an alumni chapter president. So I'm like, hey, remember when I did this and I donated this money? Can y'all help me, please? Now, I don't even have to do that for real, but people are wanting to make sure that we have as much success as possible. So, and I also, my first job was an advisor. So I'm basically supervising the job that I started out with. So I'm familiar.
Got you. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Kimberly. We really appreciate it. Lynetta, Dr. Lee, do you have any insight you want to share about how new advisors are onboarded at Lincoln?
Sure. So academic advising falls under the Division of Student Success, which I lead. And I'm in the process of reimagining our academic advisors. And so I thank you for these questions, because I had not considered number 5 or number 6. And I will now implement evaluating advisors in a different way, because we have a standard form, right? University form. But I think that this is key. And we implemented awards for the Division of Student Success 3 years ago under our current president, Brenda Allen, but had not thought about awarding advisors. And that could be a great incentive, right? But in terms of 1, 2, and 3, our onboarding is comprehensive. We understand that it is key. And many of what my colleague from Dillard stated, we do that at that onboarding. We try to make certain that we cover every single aspect to lay the foundation. And I recognize how important that is. And also communication. So we meet once a week. I do one-on-ones with our advisors. So that we are all singing the same song. I've learned that is super, super, super important. And so we are intentional about setting the scene. We do quite a bit of professional development. And I think key for us in terms of expectations are a couple of things. And that's the tour of the campus, which my colleague from Dillard mentioned. That's also looking at seeing the advisors like we see our students in a holistic way. We also cover definitions. office out, very simplistic, but so that we are all singing the same song. And then I think two pieces that we implement at Lincoln University, which have helped us tremendously, is a calendar. And so we work from a calendar in terms of training, and our advisors receive that in the onboarding process. So you know what's going to happen in August, you know what's going to happen in September, you know what you need to be doing in October. And so throughout the school year, and we also have a functional calendar. And what I mean by that is, what are you doing when? Because we want to be intentional, and we want to be in step, and we want it to be strategic. And so we use those calendars in that way. We also add quite a bit of literature where our advisors are reading and doing reflection papers, and that has helped us a great deal as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Ms. McMillan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm Nadine McMillan. I wear a couple of hats at Claflin University, but one of them is one of the first year academic advisors. And Dr. Twaina Harris is actually one of my supervisors. And she makes sure that we are trained or whatever we need to know about working with the first year students. And I think we kind of learned it, because I think we started it back officially started the first year academic advising back in 2017, the fall of 2017. And
That's right.
Right. And so I was supposed to be a part-time advisor, supposed to be part-time. But somehow that part-time is turning into the full-time. And I love it. I love working with the students and everything. And she's, like I said, we do professional development, and I'm here today to, kind of learn a little bit more from us that she probably hasn't had time to explain to us and everything.
And so I'll share a little bit of detail about how we onboard the advisors, and then Ms. McMillan, you can jump in if I miss something, because I'm really going off the top of my head right now. But we function as a team at Claflin, and so we don't do. If we're bringing on a new advisor, it's a team effort. And so that's a part of the hiring process, is to see about the high impact people. I think that we have done a pretty good job, Ms. McMillan, at finding people who fit our team, because we have established some expectations as a unit. And we want to make sure the person that joins us carries along some of those characteristics. But when you're hiring someone, it can be a hit or miss. They can present themselves as one person during the interview process, and then when it's time to do the work, it becomes a totally different person. So, but the one thing that I do require is that the advisor has to do 25 hours of training with me before they see a student. And so that is a requirement that they must complete. And the 25 hours of training does include case study work. We do look at scenarios. I do present data of our student population during the training. We look at all of the instruments that we administer to our students to make sure they're comfortable with those instruments. And they do have to, they spend some time with each of the advising team member to see how they are conducting their advising sessions. And so that is one way we onboard our advisors, is pretty much through that interview process as a team, and then the 25 hours of training.